Episode number 826. Is your message clear?
You're listening to the official BNI podcast with BNI founder and Chief Visionary Officer, Dr. Ivan Misner. Stay tuned for networking and referral marketing tips from the man who's been called the father of modern networking, along with suggestions and insights into getting the most from your membership in the world's largest networking organization, BNI.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the official BNI podcast. I'm Priscilla Rice, and I'm coming to you from Live Oak Recording Studio, which is in Berkeley, California. And I'm joined on the phone today by the founder and the Chief Visionary Officer of BNI, Dr. Ivan Misner. Hello, Ivan. How are you, and where are you?
Hi, Priscilla. I am at my home office in Austin, Texas, and spent a little time today with somebody who's been on my podcast a number of times, Sam Horn. Sam and I have Writing Wednesdays whenever I'm in town and she's in town. And, I think we talked about this in a previous podcast. We should call it Talking Wednesdays. We tend to talk about writing. So I'm in Austin today.
Okay, great. What are you sharing with us today?
Yeah. So an interesting idea, I think. When you're introducing yourself, either to an individual or to a group, like at a BNI chapter, you have a choice of how you deliver your message. The primary vehicle for your introduction is your verbal presentation. And so you have to ask yourself, does that introduction work? Is it effective? People not only judge the message, of course, they judge the messenger as well. How do you look? How do you carry yourself? How do you listen if you're doing a one-to-one? And how do you leave the conversation if you're doing a one-to-one? All of these things will affect what others do with the message that you've delivered. And the important thing to remember is to speak as if you're addressing that single person in an authentic and very clear way. As you network with friends and associates and tell them what you do, your underlying hope is that they'll use your services and pass the message to others. And here's where my message today is really important. You want to pass the message to others who will also use your services and in turn keep spreading your message. And when someone speaks about you or your business on your behalf, those same rules apply. They too will be judged how they describe what you do. And so that means that you want to do and say things that set the pattern for duplication, meaning you want to say things that get duplicated accurately. Priscilla, did you ever play the childhood game called the telephone game?
Yes, that's so fun. And it also just demonstrates what you're talking about.
Exactly. The telephone game. And I think this is something that has been done in virtually all countries. I've not been to any country that wasn't aware of the concept. And the way it works is one player whispers a message to the person sitting next to them, and that person then whispers the exact same message to the next person, and so on down the line. And the relayed message invariably gets contorted, really contorted, before reaching the last person in the chain. And the end result is often really funny, with the final whispered message bearing little resemblance to the original. So, words get lost or twisted, and more dramatically, the original meaning is often entirely lost. And the longer and more complex the starting message, the less chance it has of surviving the trip around the room.
Mm-hmm.
As a game, this can be funny. However, in real life, when it involves your business, it's not so funny. In referral marketing, communication is critical. And success rests on the delivery and the impact of your message. So similar to the telephone game we may have played as children, it's important that you keep checking down the line to ensure that your original message is being accurately passed along by your referral partners. And as you continue to build your network, you need to know how much information your fellow networkers or referral partners are really hearing and understanding. And at times, you may need to make adjustments in the way you disseminate your information so that it's duplicated and repeated effectively. So each messenger or referral partner in our case may use a different technique and they may have different motives for participating in this process. But the essence of each message is what needs to get across the finish line. What is being communicated effectively to others. Remember that your message is the description you give of your business and your target market when you introduce yourself to someone in a networking environment or when you give your weekly presentation. It's typically a few sentences. It'll take 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds in a smaller chapter to deliver that message. But if your message is too complex, if it lacks passion, or if it flies over the listener's head because you're using acronyms or phrases that they don't understand, it's not going to be memorable in a clear way. And if it's not clearly memorable, it can't be repeated. It can't be duplicated. And so the message for today's podcast is you have to ask yourself, is your message clear? And is it repeatable? And it would be interesting to test that. And there are a few ways to test this. One of them is a meeting stimulant that we have where it's called Cards in a Basket. And Priscilla, I'm sure you've seen this. You've been in BNI long enough.
Yeah.
We have everybody put their business cards in a basket or a cup or anything. And you have one member, you mix up the cards and you have one member reach in and pull out a business card. And they have to do that member's weekly presentation.
Great. Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see, is your message being delivered effectively? Because if that person is not delivering your message effectively, it might not be their fault. It might not be their fault. It might be that you haven't communicated it clearly enough for them to be able to replicate it in a conversation or in a presentation. And if they can't replicate it within the BNI context, how are they doing outside the BNI context?
Right.
And so that's one way that you can experiment. And I would urge chapters to do that meeting stimulant. And I don't know if they've been renumbered, but as I recall, that's either meeting stimulant number 1 or 2. And I've seen it done many, many, many times. And it's a lot of fun to see it done. And it's also a real learning experience. What are your thoughts on the telephone game, and is your message clear?
What you just described, doing some other members' presentation of their business, is something that we've done quite a bit in my chapter. And it can be really challenging if you're not a good listener, if you have not been paying attention. And so it's nice at least to have the card, because sometimes you don't even quite remember what your partner's name of the business is. You might know their name, but you've forgotten what they use for their business name. Some, small details like that. As far as the telephone game, I was imagining that as a fun demonstration in a chapter, and to see how it works, and send a message all the way around the room and see how it turns out at the end. Kind of a fun experiment.
If you were to do it on just one time around on one phrase or something, just to show how the phrase gets distorted. Yeah. So education coordinators or members who are listening to this, that's a great idea, Priscilla. Give it a try. Show how a message gets, distorted. Give a couple of sentence message and do the telephone game around the chapter. See how the message ends up. And that's kind of the way your message is ending up out in the world with your referral partners. It's going through 1 or 2 or 3 people, and it may not come out exactly the way you want it. I know we're almost running out of time. The very first time I saw this, Cards in a Basket, was hysterical. I don't know if I've done a podcast on this or not, but it was so funny. And this woman, they were going around the room. This woman pulled a card out, and Priscilla, she could not have been 5 foot. She was probably 4'11". I mean, she was tiny. And she pulls out the business card of an ex-college basketball player who's like 6'6", 6'7". Okay. Yeah. And it was hysterical because She, we didn't know whose card she pulled. She then stood on her chair, which, by the way, I don't always recommend. It could be dangerous. But she stood on her chair and did his presentation and nailed his presentation. Absolutely nailed his presentation. And everyone was laughing because, here's this 4-foot-something woman doing this presentation of this 6'7" guy.
Right.
Which the visual in and of itself was funny, but what was really great was that she nailed the message. And so there are a lot of great things that you can do with something like Cards in Basket.
Yeah.
That's my message for today. Keep your message clear, everyone, and make sure that it's replicable.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Meisner. This podcast is sponsored by MeisnerAudioprograms.com. These audio programs will provide you with the tools and the inspiration to powerfully enhance your BNI experience. So check out the great material that's available to you at MeisnerAudioprograms.com and use the promo code IVAN50 for 50% off of everything. All of the proceeds go to the BNI Foundation. Thank you so much for listening. This is Priscilla Rice, and we look forward to having you join us again next week for another exciting episode of the official BNI podcast.